Hello Pixies, and welcome to or back to my channel. It's Zoe here, and today I have for you the books that I can't stop thinking about. So these are books that I've read and that I have either loved or just been absolutely confused by, but still can't get out of my head, or both for one of them. These are the books I constantly think about for good or bad reasons. And I just kind of want to tell you a bit about them, and it will also let you know more about the books that I've read because I am a fairly new booktuber. And so without further ado, let's just get into it. The first book I want to talk about is Dreams Lie Beneath by Rebecca Ross. And in this book, we follow Clementine, and Clementine lives with her father in this very fantasy world. This is a fantasy book, and so she lives with her father, and they are basically nightmare keepers. And that is because once every month on the new moon, so when the moon doesn't shine, from the mountains, this magic comes tumbling down from this old place that is now abandoned, and it brings a nightmare in every town to life. One specific person's nightmare from the past month. So the nightmare keepers, their job is to document every single person's nightmare in this large nightmare book, and every single month they have to fight the nightmare and figure out how to end the nightmare so to keep people safe, because people can get injured, they can die. The nightmare keepers, they're doing a very courageous thing. In this small town, it's just her and her father doing this job. But then one day, other people come and challenge them to their job, and I think you truly do not need to know anything beyond that. It says more in the description of the book, but I feel like the description of the book doesn't really align with what the book is about. I remember really enjoying the book, but I thought I would have enjoyed it more if I didn't read the description beforehand, to be completely honest. But also, I really loved this book, obviously. Like, I can't get this book out of my head, and when I think about books that I really love, favorite books of mine, Dreams Lie Beneath always pops into my head. And it was such an intriguing concept. And it's also a standalone book, which is also, I love a standalone fantasy. I thought the imagery was great. I thought the writing was great. I thought the story was so good and like took so many unexpected turns that I wasn't expecting. And I thought it was really fun. And no one talks about it. I think it is a highly, 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 highly underrated. I can't get it out of my head. And I'm going to say that 13 billion times in this video. Next up, I'm going to talk about a book that I've already talked about so many times on this channel, despite how few videos I have. And that book is The Magician's Daughter by H.G. Perry. The Magician's Daughter, if you haven't watched any of my other videos, is about Biddy. And Biddy has been raised on the Isle of High Brazel her entire life. And the only people who live there are herself, her guardian Rowan, who is a magician, and his familiar Hutchincroft, who is usually, most often, a rabbit. Biddy doesn't really know much about the outside world, which is like our world. It is set in our world. High Brazel's off the coast of Ireland. It's more of a historical fantasy book, so there is fantasy elements, but the regular people who aren't magicians don't really know of magic. And at night, Rowan usually goes out in raven form and goes to the mainland. And Biddy doesn't really quite know what he does. But then one night, he fails to come home, and Biddy has to go on this adventure and learn about herself, learn about the outside world, learn about magic and what has been happening to it. And it's so full of heart. It is so emotional, and it's like a beautiful story. And I think Alex E. Haro blurbed the front of it, and it said like a modern fairy tale or something. It's so modern yet classic at the same time, I think another blurb was. And I can't just help but agree with that. Like, of course, the story is new, but it just feels like it's been around for so long at the same time. Like, it's an absolutely beautiful story. I loved it so, so much. Like, I just really loved it. Another book I want to talk about is one that I can't really say is a favorite, and is one that has inspired another video, which will be coming soon as well. And this book is Once Upon a Dream, which is one of the Disney Twisted Tales books. And this is a retelling, basically, or a twist on Sleeping Beauty. What I think about constantly is what you figure out later on in the book, so I don't really want to spoil it for you. But I read this book almost like 10 years ago at this point, and I still constantly And I still remember the plot points. I still remember the twist. I still remember how shocked I was. I remember being completely enamored by the story. I don't know if it would really hold up to my current taste in books since I read it such a long time ago, but I remember really, really loving it. And like the tagline for it is, "What if Sleeping Beauty never woke up?" Take from that what you will. I don't really want to spoil the story, but like for a book that I read so long ago to still remember so strongly about, I think is kind of surprising, especially since I've read so many books since then. Like, I can't even tell you how many books I've read since I read that book. Guarantee you, I've read so many since then. I've never reread this book either, so it's not even like it's been further ingrained in my brain, unlike The Magician's Daughter. I don't know what else to say, but Once Upon a Dream, I think about that book quite a bit. The next book is a book that I read this year, but I cut off at a certain point, so like books that I have read fairly recently I didn't put on the list because I feel like I need to at least think of them for a few months. But this book, it's going to be my favorites for the end of the year. Sorry about spoilers, but I think I'm gonna think about this book for forever, and that is A River Enchanted, also a Fire Endless, but we're gonna talk specifically about A River Enchanted. And in this book, we follow Jack, and Jack comes from this isle with an east side and a west side, and the two clans don't get along, and there's constant like skirmishes between the two. But Jack has been away from this isle for a long time because he has gone to the mainland to study music, and he is now a bard. But one day he is summoned back home by his lord. They need a bard because bards in this world are capable of magic, on the Isle specifically, because the Isle is kind of strange, I think, compared to the rest of the world. But bards are capable of magic, and because they're capable of magic, they think they're going to be able to help him because there's no longer a bard on the east side of the Isle. And the reason that they need help is that girls have been going missing, and they need to be able to talk to the spirits of the Isle, which only a bard can do. Jack comes back home, and he gets swept up into this mystery, and swept back up and tangled with his old nemesis, Adira. I love this book. If that wasn't obvious. Jack and Adira, they're both such good characters. The mystery elements of this book were so intriguing. I devoured these books when I was reading them. Like, everything was just so good. The writing was beautiful. If I could write a book like this, I would be the happiest person in the world, I'm pretty sure. It's beautifully written. Conjures beautiful imagery. It's a beautiful story. There's multiple love stories in it. There's multiple characters. There's just so much packed into these books. And I honestly think I'm going to think about these books for years and years and years and years. And they're going to be books that I consider my favorite books. Like, if I had read these books before my very first video, which was books to get to know me, these would have been in that video. And I think from the duology that both books are equal. And I constantly also think about the ending of A Fire Endless. If you've read those books, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I remember them very, very well. I know I've read them this year, so it's kind of recent, but like, I read a lot of books since then, and I still am thinking about these ones particularly. The next book is one of the ones that I can't really say is a book that I remember a lot about, but I also think about it quite often because it was just so confusing. And that was City of Masks. And let me pull it up real quick because I can't even tell you who it's by or anything. And like, I went on a mission to even find what it was called because I couldn't remember. I could remember what the third one was called. So City of Masks is by Mary Hoffman, and it's the first book in the Extravaganza series. It's classified as fantasy, and I guess it kind of is. It has a time travel element. It's got some magic, kind of science fiction. Follow in the first book this young man, like he's like a teenager young man. We follow him, and he lives in more of a modern world, in our world modern though, but like modern at the time this book was written. I remember also reading this book a fairly long time ago, and he is terminally ill, basically, and he discovers this like talisman that can bring him back in time, his mind, and put him into a new body where he's no longer ill. I don't remember if he looks the same, or if it's someone else's body, or if it's a body conjured for him. And like, his body in our current time is like basically like sleeping, and he has to return to it though, or else his body will die. When he time travels, he goes to 16th century Venice, according to this. And I remember the carnival aspects of this book quite well. And he gets wrapped up in this part of the world in the past. And I think it has something to do with Leonardo da Vinci. Dude, I don't remember, but I remember thinking when I was reading the series, I think I only got 2 books deep because it was so confusing for me as like a young teenager. I can't even tell you what really happens. I don't remember, but like it was just so confusing. Maybe I should revisit that. Let me know if you would be interested in seeing that, if that is the case. But this is one that I can't really say I constantly think about because I really liked it. But like I do remember strongly parts of it, but I don't really want to say because I don't want to spoil anything. I remember the ending quite well. Once again, it's a weird book. The next book is one that I can't really talk to you strongly about because it is actually the 3rd book in a series, and that is the 3rd book in the Mere Visitor Quartet by Christelle Debos, and that is A Memory of Babel, which came out long before Babel, the R.F. Kuang book that I haven't read. And the 3rd book is the one that really sticks out to me because I remember it making the most sense and the one where we're most immersed with the characters. But obviously I don't want to spoil the 3rd book for you. I loved all 4 of them. The 4th one's super confusing, don't get me wrong. And I think it could have been good as 5 books in order to make the 4th book a little bit less confusing by splitting them into 2 books so we could have had a more fleshed out version of that story. I think that could have worked, but that's just my opinion of that. I love the first one. My second one's the favorite out of the quartet, but the 3rd one is the one I remember the strongest. I really do think about a lot. This is one where we're really getting where the story is going, but just know you follow Ophelia and Thorn. I love Ophelia. I love Thorn. He's such a jerk. And the 3rd book is really when you start to get where the series is going to go, because by the first 2 books, you get a bit of it, but I would say that the central plot is much different. The next book I want to talk about is the only other one that I've read this year, and that is Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. I read this back early in the year, I think like April, maybe March. I think it might have been March, actually. And Thornhedge is another retelling of Sleeping Beauty, and we follow Toadling. And Toadling is a changeling. She was taken from the human world, taken to the fairy world, transformed into kind of a fairy-ish creature, and then she is sent back into the human world because time is different between the 2 worlds, where she is supposed to be like the fairy godmother of the fairy changeling that was left in her place. And it's a very short novella, but it doesn't feel short at the same time. Like, we're going back and forth in time. We're figuring out how Toadling became this thing. We're figuring out what has happened to this kingdom. It's just so well done for a novella. Like, I think it's like 115 pages. There's just so much in it. There's never like a slow moment, but at the same time, it's a quieter story, if that makes sense. I thought it was really clever, and I do love A Sleeping Beauty as story, if that wasn't obvious based off this list. It's really good. And it wasn't really what you expect from a Sleeping Beauty retelling, but it is quite lovely. The next book I have is, you might have heard me mentioned a lot recently, and that is Winter Song by S.J. Jones. And in this book, we follow our main character, and when she is a child, she hangs out with this boy in the forest, and he asks her if she'll one day be his bride, and she says yes, but she doesn't quite remember that. But when we come back to her, I think as an older teenager or adult, we come back and the Goblin King now wants her because she once agreed to be his bride. She is also a musician. She has a lovely relationship with her younger brother, who is also going to be a magician, set in like Germany. There's, she can't really practice music as an adult, but she's just helping her younger brother, who's considered this prodigy, even though she's probably just as good as him, if not better. But she's a girl, so she doesn't get the privilege to be a musician. But then there's the whole deal with the Goblin King, because she agreed to be his bride as a child. But then, because she refuses him, he takes her sister instead, and so now she must go on a quest to get her sister back and to go into the world of goblins. I've read this book twice. I haven't read the sequel yet, and it is a duology. I know, terrible, but again, it just kind of feels like a complete story. And I do want to read Shadow Song, I just haven't done it yet. I haven't read it in about 5 years, I think, but I still remember it so clearly. I thought it was written very well. I thought the story was really interesting, and the goblins in this world are like kind of fairy-like creatures, and goblins are on that fairy spectrum of things. And also it makes it a bit different because if it was fairies, I don't think it would be as special. But because it's goblins, it really kind of stands out in that fairy book market. And there is a lot of trickery and things going on. It's a really good book. I don't remember the main character's name, I will say that. And finally, we're to the very last book. And I think I've thought about this book more than any other, really. I think I've thought about this book every day since I've read it. And that is Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reed. This is a gothic fantasy book, and we follow our main character, who's the youngest of 3 sisters, and their father is the last magician in this city because he's driven out all the other witches and magicians and whatever you want to call them. But his 3 daughters happen to be witches, and they're all adults, but they all still live at home because he makes them work for him. And the father is cursed to never feel satisfied, so he also kind of hates his daughters, and he is abusing them, especially the 3rd one. Even though she is the most talented witch of the 3, she's also considered not to be the most beautiful or the most worthy in his eyes as the others, even though he hates all 3 of them. And we just kind of follow her on this like mission of like self-worth. There's also like there's a storyline of this murderer going around. There's her trying to figure out what she wants. There's, you know, a person she wants to be with outside of her family. It might take a second to get into, but I feel like this story was done immaculately well. I wasn't expecting the ending. It's awful and it's great at the same time. The story is awful. The things that happen to these young women are terrible. Do not get me wrong. And this in no way romanticizes abuse, but it's so well written, and the things they go through, while horrible, like the youngest one like pulls through. I think about this book constantly. Like, this is the book that I think about the most often. Man, I can't really say much about it without spoiling the book, so I don't know if this was a really good video since I can't really spoil what I think about the most often of them. But if you've read this book and you're just obsessed with it as I am, let me know. I love this one. I think it's really, really great and really, really special, and I don't think there's any other books like it. And with that, it's gonna wrap up the video. These are the books that I think about all the time, for good or bad reasons. Like, if you haven't read any of these, I would really say to try any of them. Leave any books in the comments down below that you constantly think about. We can chat about them, you can tell me about them, and maybe I'll take it as a recommendation. Give this video a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. Also, I will be posting an awful lot in December, so subscribe if you want to stick around and see more of my videos. And I guess that's it. So I guess I'm signing off now. Okay, bye.